It started with something small, something most people wouldn't even think twice about. Simone Taylor, a confident and well-dressed black woman, stepped onto the plane and took her seat in first class. The soft leather seat was a rare moment of comfort after a week filled with endless meetings, late nights, and constant travel. Simone had worked hard to be where she was, and this trip was supposed to be a chance to relax before diving into the next big project. As the plane prepared for takeoff, Simone glanced around. The other passengers seemed at ease, chatting quietly or scrolling through their phones. But Simone couldn't help but notice the subtle glances from the flight crew. Their eyes lingered just a second too long, their expressions hard to read. She brushed it off. Maybe it's nothing, she thought. She had experienced moments like this before, small, uncomfortable reminders that not everyone saw her as she saw herself. The air in the cabin felt cooler than usual. Simone reached for the call button and waited patiently. Soon, a flight attendant approached. She was tall and wore a tight smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Hi," Simone began, her voice calm and polite. "Could I have a blanket, please? It's a little cold in here." The flight attendant paused, her smile fading. She leaned slightly closer, her voice low but sharp. "Sorry, ma'am. Blankets are for paying first-class passengers." For a moment, Simone froze. Her mind raced to make sense of the words she had just heard. Paying passengers. She was a paying passenger. Why would the flight attendant think otherwise? "Excuse me?" Simone asked, her tone still steady but now tinged with confusion. The attendant's expression didn't change. If anything, her face hardened. "I'm sure you can understand," she said, her voice dripping with condescension, before turning and walking away without another word. Simone blinked, her hands gripping the armrests of her seat. Her mind replayed the interaction. It wasn't just the words that stung, it was the way the attendant had looked at her, the dismissive tone, and the assumption behind it all. It wasn't about the blanket anymore. Around her, a few other passengers had noticed the exchange. Some whispered quietly, while others avoided eye contact altogether. Simone felt a hot flush of anger rise in her chest, but she didn't let it show. Years of facing moments like this had taught her to stay calm, to think before acting. But inside, something had shifted. She thought about how often people had underestimated her, how they judged her without knowing anything about her accomplishments, her hard work, or her story. This wasn't just about being denied a blanket, it was about respect. Simone straightened in her seat, her face composed, though her mind was far from calm. They don't know who they're dealing with, she thought to herself. She wasn't the type to make a scene. But she also wasn't the type to let something like this go. Little did the flight crew know, this small moment of disrespect would set off a chain of events they could never have imagined. The cabin was quiet, but not silent. Simone could hear the low buzz of whispers from nearby passengers. Some people shook their heads in disbelief, while others let out soft chuckles, as if what they had just seen was a joke. But to Simone, it wasn't funny. She noticed how the flight crew continued their work as if nothing had happened. They moved up and down the aisle, handing out drinks and snacks with forced smiles, acting like their dismissive words toward her didn't matter. They didn't even glance in her direction again. Simone sat perfectly still in her seat. Her back was straight, her hands rested calmly in her lap, and her face was smooth and unreadable. On the outside, she looked like she was unaffected. But on the inside, her thoughts were swirling. Her heart beat faster, not from anger, but from something else. She wasn't upset enough to lash out, to demand an apology, or to argue. No, she was far from that. Simone had learned long ago that letting emotions take over didn't solve problems. Instead, she was thinking. This wasn't the first time something like this had happened to her. Over the years, she had faced comments, stares, and judgments that seemed small to others but cut deeply. People often underestimated her because of how she looked, assuming she didn't belong, didn't deserve the same respect, or wasn't capable of achieving great things. She was used to it. But used to it didn't mean it didn't bother her. Simone's eyes drifted to the window beside her. The faint reflection of her face stared back at her. She noticed how calm she appeared, even though her mind was racing. She thought about all the people who had looked at her the way that flight attendant did, with a mix of doubt and disdain. The truth was, she could have let it go. It would have been easy to let it slide and just focus on her journey. She could have bought herself a blanket online, a dozen blankets even, without breaking a sweat. If she wanted, she could have booked another flight entirely, one with better service. But that wasn't the point. The point was that this wasn't about the blanket anymore. Simone wasn't angry. Not yet. She was thinking of something bigger, something that would matter far beyond this single flight. She had spent years learning how to stay quiet, how to observe, and how to wait for the right moment. Power, she believed, didn't always come from making noise. Sometimes, the most powerful move was made in silence. She let her fingers lightly tap the armrest as she thought. The other passengers returned to their own business, and the murmurs died down. To them, it might have seemed like Simone had let the moment pass. But Simone knew something they didn't. She wasn't the kind of person who forgot these things. She wasn't the kind of person to let disrespect go unanswered. What she was planning in her mind wasn't about revenge, it was about setting things right. She took a deep breath, her expression still calm. The flight attendants may not have cared about the consequences of their words, but Simone would make sure they learned. And when they did, it would be a lesson they would never forget. The flight attendants moved up and down the aisle, chatting and laughing as if nothing had happened. Simone sat quietly in her seat, watching. She noticed the way they acted, how they smiled warmly at some passengers but barely gave others a second glance. The difference in how they treated people was clear, and it didn't sit right with her. Every now and then, one of the attendants would glance in Simone's direction. Their looks were brief, but Simone caught them. She could tell they weren't worried about her causing any trouble. They had already decided she wouldn't speak up or make a fuss. Maybe they thought she didn't have the confidence or the power to stand up for herself. Simone didn't react. She didn't glare back or call them out. Instead, she stayed calm and kept observing. She had learned long ago that you can learn a lot by staying quiet and watching how people behave. She noticed how the attendants leaned in and smiled when talking to a well-dressed man sitting 2 rows ahead of her. They laughed at his jokes and made sure he had everything he needed. But when they stopped at an elderly woman in the same row as Simone, their tone was completely different, short, rushed, and almost rude. Simone recognized the pattern. She had seen it before in boardrooms, restaurants, and even schools. People like these attendants treated others based on assumptions on what they thought someone was worth, not on who they truly were. By the time the plane started its descent, Simone had seen enough. She was no longer angry about the blanket or even about how they had spoken to her. Now, it was about something bigger. She thought about all the people who had probably experienced moments like this and didn't have the power to change it. The plane touched down, and passengers began gathering their belongings. Simone reached under her seat for her bag, but she wasn't in a rush to leave. Before standing, she picked up the notepad from the pocket in front of her. With smooth, steady handwriting, she wrote a note. Her message was simple but clear. To the flight crew, you've taught me more in one trip than I ever learned in business school. Thank you. She placed the note neatly on her tray table, where it couldn't be missed, and stood to gather her things. Simone moved with purpose, her posture calm but firm. She wasn't just leaving the plane, she was walking away with a plan forming in her mind. What the crew didn't know and couldn't have guessed was who Simone really was. She wasn't just any passenger. Simone Taylor was a powerful entrepreneur, someone who built businesses and solved problems. She had resources, connections, and, most importantly, the drive to make things right when she saw something wrong. This wasn't the end of the story. For Simone, it was just the beginning. She left the plane with a quiet determination, knowing she had the ability to change the way people like those flight attendants treated others, not just for herself but for everyone who had ever been dismissed or disrespected. 2 weeks had passed since that flight, and life for the airline staff seemed normal until a surprising announcement changed everything. An internal memo landed in everyone's inboxes: the airline has been sold to a new owner. The news spread quickly. Flight attendants whispered about it in break rooms, wondering who the mysterious new boss could be. Some joked nervously, others speculated about big changes, but no one had any real answers. The day of the first staff meeting under the new management arrived. The large conference room was filled with chatter as employees filed in, taking their seats. The atmosphere was tense but curious. Everyone wanted to know, who was the new owner, and what did this mean for them? The room quieted as the door opened. Simone Taylor stepped inside. She was dressed in a sharp black pantsuit that fit her like it was made just for her. Her heels clicked confidently on the floor as she walked to the front of the room. The air seemed to shift. For a moment, no one spoke. Then one of the flight attendants from Simone's flight gasped loudly. "It's her," the attendant whispered to a colleague, who quickly looked away. Simone scanned the room, her calm gaze making everyone sit up a little straighter. She placed her hands on the podium and began to speak. "Good afternoon," she said, her voice steady but firm. "My name is Simone Taylor. I am the new owner of this airline." A ripple of shock ran through the room. People exchanged wide-eyed glances, their faces a mix of disbelief and confusion. Simone continued, her tone unshaken. "I purchased this airline because I believe it can be better for employees, better for passengers, and better for the world." She paused, letting her words sink in. "But," she said, her voice growing sharper, "some of you do not represent the values this company should stand for. Respect, dignity, and professionalism, these are not optional. They are essential." Simone's eyes landed on the flight attendants from her flight. They looked uncomfortable now, fidgeting in their seats. "You," Simone said, her voice cutting through the room like a blade, "showed me what needs to change. Your behavior was unacceptable, and there is no place for it here. Consider this your notice. You are no longer employed by this airline." Gasps echoed around the room. The dismissed attendants sat frozen, their faces pale. Simone wasn't finished. "This is not about revenge," she said, her voice calm but unyielding. "This is about setting a higher standard. This airline will treat every passenger and employee with respect, no matter who they are or what they look like." She outlined her plans for change: new training programs focused on respect and inclusion, stricter accountability for unprofessional behavior, and a renewed focus on customer experience. As Simone spoke, the room slowly shifted. Many employees nodded in agreement, feeling inspired by her vision. Others, especially those who had been careless or dismissive in their roles, squirmed uncomfortably. Simone ended her speech with a final, powerful statement: "This is a new chapter for this airline. Together, we can build something better. But it starts with accountability, and it starts today." She left the room as confidently as she had entered, leaving behind stunned silence and a company forever changed. The news spread quickly, capturing attention everywhere. Headlines like "Black Woman Denied a Blanket Now Owns the Airline" and "Entrepreneur Brings Big Change to the Skies" were plastered across newspapers, websites, and social media. People were amazed by the story, and many felt inspired. Simone Taylor had turned an insult into an opportunity for change, and the world was watching. The former crew members who had treated Simone so poorly tried to defend themselves. They gave excuses, saying they didn't mean any harm or that they were just following rules. But Simone didn't waste time listening to them. She wasn't interested in excuses. Actions spoke louder than words, and their actions had been clear. "I'm not here for apologies," Simone told a reporter when asked about the fired crew. "This isn't about punishing anyone. It's about making sure things like this don't happen again, not to me, not to anyone." Under Simone's leadership, the airline began to change. She introduced new training programs for all staff, teaching them the importance of respect and kindness. Employees learned how to treat every passenger with care, no matter who they were. The message was simple: everyone deserved to feel valued. Simone also created programs to hire people from different backgrounds, giving opportunities to those who had been overlooked before. She made sure the airline was a place where both employees and passengers could feel safe and respected. The results were remarkable. Passengers noticed the difference right away. The service was friendlier, the atmosphere was warmer, and the entire airline felt more welcoming. People from all walks of life started choosing Simone's airline because they knew they would be treated with dignity. One passenger shared their story online: "I used to hate flying, but this airline changed my mind. They actually care about people. You can feel it the moment you step on the plane." The airline's success grew quickly. Profits soared, and the company became known as one of the most inclusive and customer-focused airlines in the industry. Simone's story inspired countless people. She often received letters and messages from strangers who thanked her for standing up for herself and for others. Many of them shared their own stories of being mistreated or underestimated, saying Simone gave them hope. When asked why she had taken such a bold step, Simone's answer was always the same. "This wasn't about revenge," she said. "It was about creating a culture where no one feels lesser because of who they are. Everyone deserves respect, and that's what I want this airline to stand for." Simone's calm yet powerful message resonated deeply with people. She proved that strength doesn't always have to be loud, and that change can start with something as small as a blanket. As the airline continued to thrive, Simone remained a symbol of resilience and justice. She showed the world that being underestimated isn't a weakness, it's an opportunity to rise above and make a difference. And in the end, Simone didn't just change an airline. She changed the way people think about respect, kindness, and the power of standing up for what's right. Simone Taylor's story became one that people all over the world remembered and shared. It wasn't just because she bought an airline or fired a rude crew. It was because of what her journey meant. She showed people that they could stand tall in the face of disrespect, that they could turn moments of unfairness into opportunities for change. In interviews, Simone often spoke about what happened that day on the plane. "I wasn't angry about the blanket," she explained with a calm smile. "It wasn't even about the words they said. It was about the way they looked at me, the way they assumed I didn't belong." That's a feeling so many people experience. It sticks with you. Simone's words were simple but powerful. Sometimes, people judge you by how you look or where they think you come from. They decide who you are before you even have a chance to show them. That moment on the plane reminded me of something I had learned a long time ago: people will always have their opinions, but their opinions don't define you. She paused before continuing, her voice steady. "What matters is how you respond. You can let it bring you down, or you can use it to rise up." I chose to rise. For Simone, rising up didn't mean yelling or seeking revenge. It meant creating something better. "Power isn't about being loud or showing off," she often said. "Real power is quiet. It's knowing who you are and acting with purpose. It's about making choices that change things not just for yourself, but for others too." Her story inspired people from all walks of life. Students wrote to her, telling her how they stood up to bullies at school after hearing her words. Workers shared stories of how they spoke up against unfair treatment at their jobs. Parents taught their children Simone's lesson: never let someone else decide your worth. Simone also became a role model for young girls, especially girls who felt overlooked or underestimated. She visited schools, giving speeches and answering questions. "How did you stay calm when they were mean to you?" one girl asked during a visit. Simone smiled warmly and said, "Because I knew they were wrong about me." And when someone is wrong about you, their words don't have to hurt. You know your own value, and that's what matters. Her message was clear and easy to understand, even for children. "It's not about where you start," she said in a final interview. "It's not even about what others say about you. What matters is how you choose to move forward. When someone tries to tell you that you don't belong, you prove them wrong not with anger, but with action." Simone's words carried weight because they came from her heart. She had lived through the struggle, and she had risen above it. And with her calm strength and unwavering determination, Simone reminded the world that anyone, no matter their background, can change their story. It's not where you come from or how others see you, it's what you do when it's your turn to act.